So thanks for tuning in. I'm pleased today to have Russ Sbriglia and Slavoj Zizek to talk about Lacan. And I think that a good starting point would be, since all of us like to think about the way Lacan helps us to make sense of the contemporary political situation, a good starting point would be the contemporary political question of all contemporary political questions. That is the war between Russia, the war launched on Ukraine by Russia. So Russ, do you have an opening Lacanian thought about this war?
I'd rather see where Slavoj goes first. I'm gonna punt and defer to Slavoj.
Okay.
I want to see where we go.
Like the Buffalo Bills fan that he is, he punts. So
I punt. Yeah, exactly.
Ukrainians who say when they see Russian tanks, I rather see my neighbor go first.
Exactly. You go into the front line first. I'll wait. I'll see how that goes.
Okay. Then have a little bit of patience, because some of those who follow us may know that I am involved in a friendly critical debate from time to time with Dwayne Russell from Canada, who now found himself in exile. He had to escape from Russia in one of those Azerbaijan, I think, crazy republics, or Kazakhstan. And he wrote a critical review, which is very nicely written. And it concerns, that's why I'm mentioning it, basic Lacanian notions of what is going on today. And I will try to make some counter arguments. It's not about directly war in Ukraine. It is about what is going on today. I mean, in our global world, how this world is structured. Because the interesting thing is that some Lacanians, with Jacques Lacan on the top, moved into a direction which was already indicated half a century ago by Deleuze, this idea of a post-Oedipal universe and so on. They gave it a paranoiac twist, these Lacanians. The main notion is generalized foreclosure, which means we no longer live in a world where we have conflicts, debates, even wars, but within a shared symbolic space, that it's simply, we are all singularities. Singularities in the sense that me as a social entity, a state, a nation, we don't really communicate, we just project onto the other what we foreclose, not just repress from our universe. So we live as islands of jouissance, and we no longer even need. Truth is out of the game, doesn't function. Even meaningful symbolic fictions don't work. It's just we, again, not repress, but foreclose what we feel as a threat. And then this foreclosed, since we are in a psychotic universe where symbolic castration is inoperative, where lack itself is lacking, this then returns with a vengeance in the real as the paranoiac projection of our enemy. May I make a short quote, because it describes nicely Russell's position. We are now in an era of foreclosure, so that traditional notions of political uprising, civil wars, and revolutions, insofar as they operate within a shared social world, seem increasingly impotent. In a time of total war, an era that I elsewhere refer to as the era of singularities, civil war and political revolutions are impossible. The idea is that if you have dissidents, protesters, and so on, it is still the situation of repression, return of the repressed, where you share some kind of social space and then you have conflicts, but within a shared social space. But that today, there is no longer this shared social space. And a quote from Roussel, the real, this is late Miller at its purest, the real is lawless. It relates to a mode of jouissance outside of any scope of truth or meaningful fiction. I think the mistake is here something that Miller was slowly approaching for decades, when first anti-Oedipus and then feminism and so on emerged. His first reaction was, they don't get it. They think patriarchy in a vulgar way, imaginary identification, father. They don't know what the name of the father, symbolic law is. Then all of a sudden, when he saw that this doesn't function, he turned his position around into the other extreme. He is now, in some sense, more Deleuzian than Deleuze ever dared to be. No social link, just modes of jouissance, of enjoyment, and the only relation within them are wars.
Slavoj, can I jump in quickly?
Yeah.
Do you think that Lacan himself, in a way, paves the way for this when he himself moves from paternal metaphor to santome? Like, isn't a santome, and it's interesting because you have evoked santome in your own thought, I think, as an important idea. But I almost think that once you make that move to the santome, you have confessed that all we are islands of jouissance, and the paternal metaphor no longer bonds us together, right? I mean, isn't that already in Seminar 23? Isn't there already that misstep?
Retroactively. Now, it wasn't clear to me, but retroactively now, I tend to agree with you, Todd, because I think that Lacan in the last years was experimenting all the time. Okay, I'll put it like this. This is my classical position. Seminar 20 and one or two earlier, one or two later, are his final consistent position. But there he gets into a deadlock. Mm-hmm. And then he is trying for ways out. That's why, to confirm you, Todd, I think that in contrast to Lacan's earlier big literary interpretations, Antigone, Hamlet, Claudel, Coufontaine trilogy, and so on, I never liked his Joyce,
right,
The Symptom. Right. I think it's a failure. It basically ignores, it is like ignores the detailed texture of Joyce. I think it's a little bit like what I do often. Use a literary work or whatever, but clearly just as a pretext to deploy certain categories. And even here, Lacan oscillates, you know how, Todd, to confirm you. You mentioned when we were in conversation before going public, this paradox of Miller going in theory in an ultra-radical dimension. We are islands of jouissance, no communication, blah, 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 post-patriarchal. But the social implication of this is not some crazy radical, I don't know, anarchist theory, you know. But on the contrary, a move towards not even liberal centrist, but I would have put it moderately conservative position. a fear of any change, and so on. So,
and isn't it also?
Sorry, just to return. So yes. Yeah. So I think all this after seminar 20, 21, 22, all these later attempts of Lacan are for me attempts to resolve a certain deadlock, which, as Lacan openly admitted at the very end, it's a tragic text. You know, his last seminar is like, he came there, 500 people in the hall, and he talked for 1 minute and he left, and that was it. And the very last one, or one before, of his public appearances was simply the admission of a failure. So, you know why this is important? I've written, I forgot where, about this, how wrong, not only of Lacan, but of other thinkers, this idea is that they were approaching some final point where they finally saw the light. That's it. And I have nothing against her. She is not stupid. You know, Catherine Millot, not Millet, not that group sex lady, but Catherine Millot, Lacan's last official mistress. You know that I remember I was there. After Lacan died, her status was elevated into a kind of a mystical level. She knows the truth because the idea, it was a wonderful myth. I also almost liked it. The idea was that when Lacan was dying, she was with him and he whispered to her some final theoretical mystery. And I am more and more opposed to this idea that at the end, there is the final enlightenment, truth. You know how badly it ended with Louis Althusser.
Right.
In Lire la Capitale, he put the epistemological cap into German ideology, then he postponed it, then towards the end, he found one passage in a letter by Marx on a German economist. He criticized Adolf Wagner, I think. And Althusser, it's quite tragically, you know, claims that only that in one sentence, Marx really saw it and so on. So I think it's not simply that at the end you approach the light. No,
right.
I think already.
I would just say, like, I think that to me, I this is something I've been thinking about. Like, it seems like in Seminar 16, From Another to the Other, right, where he comes up with this notion of surplus jouissance for the first, plus de jouir, for the first time, right? And then it's like he's on the edge of thinking about capitalism differently, like writing his own different theory of capital, like writing his own version of capital almost. And then he breaks it off in 16, and then 17 comes up with the four discourses, and it completely, he abandons basically the plus de jouir and sticks it in a different discourse. But I think he doesn't really, I think that, to me, that's the decisive point where he could have gone in this one direction.
I think there are even more such points, but I tend to agree with you that this is the big one. You know why? Because now I will say something terribly naive, but I think it's basically true. I think that there is an unresolved problem with Lacan. The four discourses, are they just a totally ahistorical matrix, valuable for all times, blah, 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 or is there a certain historicity in them? Like pre-modern societies, master's discourse, then modernity, in its two aspects, hysteria and university discourse. And then, now it's a big question. Can we politicize the analytic discourse? But basically, if we read capitalist discourse, not as simply a fifth discourse or which of the, but as precisely branded by this tension between hysteria, that's everyday capitalist hysteria, always more surplus, surplus. University is the power structure described by Foucault and so on. And Lacan somehow saw this tension in capitalism. You have this incessant surplus. At the same time, you have the logic of university style of domination. And then at a certain point, Lacan saw that he cannot simply squeeze what you, Todd, pointed out correctly, the entire topic of surplus enjoyment and so on. He cannot squeeze it simply into 4 discourses. There is something more radical going on here, because obviously, as you, Todd, pointed out in your book about capitalist desire or whatever that bullshit is title, that capitalism, in some sense, a structure of surplus desire, which is all the time here, comes out at such only with capitalism. So, in some sense, Lacan ended here at a deadlock, which is why also people don't notice this, how Lacan oscillates also between different political positions. Sometimes he sounds like a liberal. That was then Miller's reading. Tolerate others, jouissance, blah, blah, against any totalitarian. Sometimes he even sounds a little bit conservative. This is also an aspect taken over by Miller, where he says it's this cynical conservatism. You know, we know it's all a fake, but we know it's a symbolic fiction, but if you disturb the fiction too much, there is violence, there is riot, and so on and so on. So this kind of conservative cynicism with some hints about possible post-capitalist modes, but there Lacan again then has this tendency to offer a solution, which I don't think it works. Like, you remember his mysterious hint that a saint is the outside capitalist discourse. I know what he wants to say, but I doubt it. If anything, I almost tempted to say the capitalist itself, at its purest, already is a saint.
Right.
Somebody who
like they give up their lives for capital, right? Like that. That's right. So we should, the first thing, gesture, I hope we all agree here, to be really a Lacanian today is not to search for a last secret mystery in late Lacan, because these readers, now I'll be really evil. Who is this irony in this, of course? One of the greatest writers today, much higher than Joyce and Kafka, Dan Brown. In his work, they always look for some last symbol, mystery, hidden manuscript. So I would accuse Miller and all those guys like kind of making another Da Vinci Code out of Lacan, you know.
Well, yeah.
Please, now we totally overshadowed you, which but nonetheless.
No, it's related. It's related to what we were talking about, because we're talking about the later Lacan seminars, and I mean maybe we can go back to politics and jouissance later, because I think that's today. I mean it's been this way for a long time, but especially today, Lacan's theory of jouissance is indispensable to any sort of political ideological analysis. But I'm thinking along the lines of this. I still have the image of somebody leaning in and Lacan's going to say Rosebud at the last minute. He's going to, it's going to be some sort of Citizen Kane thing.
Rosebud.
Yeah. But the way in which, and I think that this is true more of a certain type of clinical or clinician approach to Lacan, that where the text itself is treated as sort of, a sacred font of wisdom. And I just was thinking about Seminar 20 and the directions in which Lacan went. And now I'm thinking about sex and gender and the formulas of sexuation in Seminar 20, and how I've noticed that this is not just, I think it's particularly, among sort of Millerians, but the insistence on maintaining the notion of sex as though, masculine and feminine are some sort of essential quality, as opposed to, I think that what, you and in the Sex and the Failed Absolute book, Alenka in her book, What is Sex, kind of rescue, I guess the question is, to what degree is this already in Lacan, or to what degree is the Ljubljana school more general teasing this out, where sex is, according to your, sex is the fundamental cut, and then gender is a second order. It's a symbolic way of trying to deal with that cut that is the real. And so you've been, Slavoj, you've said for a long time now, right? There isn't really is there really a masculine subject position? Masculinity as such is a fake. The pure subject position is femininity. And so I'm wondering, is that to go back to how Lacan treats that in 20, do we have to update Lacan in order to sort of save it from a sort of essentialism with regard to, gender or sex? Or is that the only proper way to read Lacan? It's it's there. We have to read him this way.
Before you answer, can I just want to add to the question? I just want to add to the question, because I was talking to Guy Legoffet, who I think is a really smart guy. Guy Legoffet. Yeah. Really smart guy.
What is he doing now? For years, I haven't heard. Did he publish something?
Yeah, he's still publishing books. They don't get translated, but he's still publishing books in French, and he's very good, I think. And
he speaks English.
His English is very good. For some reason, no one invites him here, but he's really, I guess, because his books haven't appeared in English, but his English is fine, and it's great. It's better than mine. But he said to me, that he thought that, he wrote a book on Le Patu de Lacan, so he's very invested in Seminar 20, right? But he thinks that by tying the formulas to sexuation, that Lacan, in a way, falls for, that line by Ernest Jones, God did make them man and woman, that he thinks the notion of feminine jouissance is already going over to mysticism and
now you touched something absolutely crucial.
Okay.
I didn't succeed in convincing many people, but I saw there in Lacan, you may know this, the big conflict between my reading and up to a point Joe objects of formulas of sexuation, and the predominant one is that the predominant reading does precisely what you critically pointed at, Todd, now. They not so much essentialize as elevate jouissance féminine in some untouchable beyond you enjoy, but you cannot even name it. It's outside symbolic. While I took formulas of jouissance much more literally and claim, no, if anything, woman is more totally in the symbolic order. There is nothing which is outside. And that's why you get to the non-all. And my ultimate example is Lacan's great case that Saint Teresa. It's not just that statue on the cover of Seminar 20, but you know that she was writing like crazy. If there ever was a writer she is not after some mystical experience I think that precisely this idea of femininity as some elusive point of a mystical real, which always eludes the symbolic grasp and so on, is precisely maybe even I would say male fantasy of.
Right, I think that's right. I mean, it's the worst kind of anti-feminism. And I would also say, the only thing I would say is, I think Lacan himself is ambiguous about this, right? Like,
that's my point.
Okay.
He, on the one hand, he insists that the feminine non-all means precisely no exception. There is nothing which is outside the phallic dimension. So, as it were, you undermine phallic logic from within by universalizing it. Universalizing in the sense of precisely no exception. But I agree with you, Todd. At some point, Lacan already, as if I think he didn't think things to the end there. You already have this mystical tendency of, But remember that this was, and I think it's theoretically a fake, a tendency in Lacan, even from his early days. And here I don't like Lacan, who celebrates his standing up against philosophy, like I stand up against philosophy. Don't you remember, it's usually not often commented, his first big écrit, function of the word blah, 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 his so-called Rome manifesto, Rome discourse, ends up with some stupid quote from some early Buddhism or whatever. The last words of wisdom. He refers to this positively, as there is some last mystical insight. And I think this is the worst operation possible. Instead of admitting failure, you construct some mystical point of reference which we cannot even approach it, but it's there. You have a couple of references like this in Lacan, like at some other point, is it in Encore or somewhere else? Lacan even says that mystical texts are the best that there is.
Yeah, that's seminar. That's the
right. Yeah, in his arrogant way, he says, and also écrit de Lacan, and also his écrit. Without this, I think again, this way of how he wants to get over philosophy, that we philosophers want to conceptualize everything, but there is some mystical, elusive point, and so on. Again, this is the worst of Lacan. Also in what sense? Did you notice how Lacan often, I'm tempted, but I'm getting old and senile, I would have to go through it. I noticed how Lacan often, is not Lacanian enough. He gives an example, but then he fails to draw the ultimate Lacanian conclusion from it. I think something like this happened when he tried to deal with surplus jouissance in connecting it to surplus value. Yeah. He failed not in the sense of there was a dimension there which eluded him. No, he missed the Lacanian dimension of it. And if I may amuse our readers and you briefly, where I first noticed these failures of Lacan, already, which is the seminar, is it 4, I think, Formations of the Art, where he talks a lot about jokes. 5, about jokes.
Yeah, 5.
Yeah. I mentioned this in one of my books, I hope readers don't know it. He, of course, quotes there that classical Jewish joke of the guy who tries to sell you a bride, matchmaker or what. Yeah. And for every bad feature, he finds an excuse. Like, I don't know, she is ugly. Oh, at least you will not have to worry that she will deceive you, blah, blah, blah. And Lacan then writes, I couldn't believe. I was like Tom or Jerry in the cartoon when they see something shocking, the eyes jump out and in the air. I couldn't believe it that Lacan just says, oh, and so on indefinitely. No, it's not indefinitely.
Right.
The whole point of a joke is that at a certain point, you arrive at a feature which this matchmaker or whatever mediator cannot explain away, and then he says, what do you want her to be perfect? Or, you know. And I was just shocked that literally, again, Lacan doesn't get the Lacanian point of the story. So that's why I look at Lacan as an author who is much more inconsistent, trying new possibilities. It's also what I try to develop. I forgot in which of my books how the game Lacan plays with his seminars and écrits. As he emphasizes, this is what I like in Lacan. In seminars, he is not teaching. He is himself analysant. He is improvising its theoretical free associations. In écrit, he is then an analyst giving formulas, but, and that's his whole game. These formulas, Miller once, decades ago, explained this nicely to us. Lacan gives these formulas with the hope that we, his careful readers, will discern the meaning of these formulas.
That he himself doesn't know.
Yeah, he himself doesn't know.
Yeah,
yes, that's crucial. His écrits are not just no, literally, we have to work out the meaning. And again, Lacan doesn't know. This is absolutely crucial. To read.
I think that's really.
I think Lacan very nicely, in this very duality of seminars and écrits, undermines the temptation which is great in him to play very ruthlessly the role of a master.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I mean, my reading of the four discourses is that he's trying to disavow his own mastery. I mean, I think he creates this, he carves out this space of the analyst discourse where he can do what he does without being a master. And I think that's a problem. But here's what I want to ask you. Like, do you think, I wonder if you would accept this, that it's almost like there's a struggle between Kant and Hegel for Lacan's soul. And when he gives into the mysticism, he's the Kantian, there's a thing beyond what we can know. And then there's this Hegelian other side where he's being a dialectical.
And we see this at its purest with how Lacan deals with femininity.
Yes.
You have the Kantian notion, femininity is the thing in itself. And it's the Hegelian notion, no, femininity is the very inconsistency, contradiction, all that bullshit, and so on.
Yeah.
You know, that's why, again, another point. I think that, we don't have time now to develop it fully, I think that Lacan's move from Antigone to Signe de Coufontaine is precisely, in my view, I exaggerate a little bit, a move from Kant to Hegel.
Yeah.
His reading of Antigone is that you have these moments of approaching the real, but it's too strong, it burns you. You know, this idea of encountering the real as a transgressive experience, entering some mysterious domain between the two deaths, and so on and so on. In other words, Antigone is still sublime in this sense. An ordinary shitty being, lady, elevated to the dignity of the thing. And
a Kantian sublime, right? Not a Hegelian, a Kantian sublime.
Kantian.
Not a Hegelian sublime.
Signe de Coufontaine is definitely not sublime.
Right.
It's really this, when the moment when sublime turns into a piece of shit. It's much more authentic, tragic, and so on. And Can I finish?
Yeah.
If you or some readers saw the movies, and in this way, I will also confess to you the breathtaking depths of my taste. Namely, one movie, I will just mention it, because if I talk about it, you will immediately cut the connection and send me a message. Nice to meet you. Maybe in the next decade or two, we meet again. I didn't like the movie, but somehow I almost like the idea of trigger warning. It's really low. Roland Emmerich, Moonfall.
Oh.
You know, this idea that the moon is an artificial object. It's not natural. There is machinery. But what I wanted to say is that a more correct theory, there I'm nonetheless tempted to distinguish in an almost old-fashioned position, masculine, feminine stance, is, did you see the two movies? It's already important. One is documentary, the other is fiction, which are both based on a real case. It's easy to get them on YouTube, whatever. The masculine one is Tinder Swindler. Documentary, and no, here in Europe, it's a legend of an Israeli guy who cheated women, claiming, exploiting them, claiming he's mega rich, just his credit card doesn't work, stealing money from one, moving to the next one. But it's simple cheating. Yeah. Then another one, I was fascinated by it. Inventing Anna. It's a fiction also based on a real case about a woman who was doing something similar. She appeared from nowhere in New York, claiming that she has a father who is a billionaire, but has a small conflict with him and borrowed money, blah, blah. But she wasn't simply cheating. She was so deeply in her cheating that it was sincere. She was ready to risk everything. That's why she was a true hero. Like, even when she was caught red-handed, she never admitted defeat. She got so identified with her fake that here I'm tempted to say it's important that she is a woman and he, the ordinary cheat, because he, the Jewish guy, he simply cheats, and he is a manipulator. He has a secret ego where he pulls blah, blah. But she doesn't cheat in this sense. She cheats because she herself falls for her false image, no? And so, okay,
I wonder, Slavoj, do you think that, I mean, in a way, this kind of brings it back to what you talked about the Dwayne Russell, you know, the notion of the islands of jouissance. Like, in a way, like, aren't you talking about an effective symbolic fiction that's still functioning today, right? Like that's the point of that. I think that's the point of that film, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, you know where, okay, let's now go maybe quickly to Ukraine. No?
Yeah.
Where do I see in today's crazy world still symbolic fictions, even the dimension of truth, and so on and so on? One of the lines of attack, very nice, intelligent, of Dwayne Russell is that he opposes my reading of the greatest American philosopher of his time, now he's dead, Donald Rumsfeld. You know, my notion of unknown knowns.
Right.
Yep.
And predictably, Russell says, this is still the notion of repression, not yet foreclosure. You have a tension, you have an unconscious, you don't know what you know. And then he said, I misread Rumsfeld. It's not that in his dealing with weapons of mass destruction, it's not that Rumsfeld was determined by unknown knowns. No, that Rumsfeld was in a psychotic way fully identified with what he thought that he knew, with known knowns. that was his psychosis, foreclosing, excluding every reality. He sincerely thought there are weapons of mass destruction there. To this, we don't have time to go on too much. Yeah. I would say that I still stick to my interpretation. Not only was Rumsfeld and generally Bush administration, not only were they not really sure if Saddam has them, I think they positively knew that Saddam does not have them. And you know why? Because I read wonderful analysis, not leftist stuff, even centrist, rightist stuff. That if they were to be really sure that Saddam has weapons of mass destruction, nuclear or some really poisonous gases, they wouldn't attack Iraq the way they did.
That's right. That's why we don't attack North Korea right now, right? Like that's
yeah. But because they have them.
Yeah, they have it. Right.
But another thing, I think that I already that weapons of mass destruction. I gave a Hitchcockian reading somewhere now in a not yet published text, where Donald Rumsfeld's MacGuffin, something, it's a pretext. Yeah. You needed it, and I think now in Ukraine war, we again have a MacGuffin, which is this mysterious Ukrainian funded by, you say, secret bioweapon labs. Right. They are now officially evoked. A couple of days ago, even Putin mentioned them when the obvious question he was asked it, I think, somewhere, like by persons who were not even against Russia. They even said, okay, we would have understood if you, apart from Crimea, island, half island, whatever, if you were to occupy only the Donbas region, Lugansk or whatever, I don't know, that part where really the majority are Russians. But why occupy all of Ukraine? Okay, the first official story was because they are neo-Nazi drug addicts, But now he came out with a crazy story that because precisely in the west of Ukraine, around Lviv, and so on, there are these secret labs which pose a threat, and so on and so on. And again, like with Iraqi weapons of mass destruction, I claim that Russians know, not only they are not sure, not only are they bluffing, they know this is not true. Because if it were true, they would probably acted in a totally different way. What I would have done is locate the places and simply, I don't know, with special paratrooper units, like treat it as a major danger. They are not doing this. Yeah. And you see, this proves that MacGuffin or object A, cause, blah, blah, this is a symbolic category. This is not psychotic category. Another thing, if I may just go on briefly, which I love in a sad way, is that, that I have friends there. For me, it's very personal. In Russia, the true heroes of this story are also Russians who losing their job, beaten by the police, and so on.
We're going to jail, right? They're going to jail. They're going to jail.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not just, and your life is ruined afterwards. Right. You are designated, they have the official title now for this, foreign agent. This doesn't mean you are necessarily arrested. It means you are forever excluded from any public space which is mediated by state, like no university, no public appearances. But what I want to say is that the way the struggle goes on in Russia, it's not a psychotic foreclosure, exclusion. It's a very nice dialectical struggle. For example, this is for me very Lacanian. What is the freedom of language? That you mediate statements with their unspoken background in such a way that a thing can mean almost everything. The absence of a thing means, like, did you notice there were millions of views on, Putin must be a little bit like those American racists who are furious when the police kills a black guy. There is always some stupid other black guy with the iPhone who records it, Unfortunately, in Russia, it's the same. So did you notice that? Because two words are now prohibited. You are not allowed to say no to war. In Russian, it's "нет войне." It's no to war. In Russian, there are two words. So if you have this on a piece of paper, you get arrested. Yeah. But did you see it on YouTube News? What happened? A certain old lady demonstrated with a paper. You know what was written on it? Two words. Not to war, but literally two words. And she was still arrested.
She was still arrested.
Yeah, as if, then probably she said, but wait a minute. What if these two words were, I don't know, love Putin or what? Right. No. They said, we all know what these two words are. And then this went to the Hegelian Lacanian extreme. You can see video clips where a lady has a paper on which, you know what it is? Nothing.
Nothing, right.
Nothing. She was still arrested. Sure. And she said, okay, sorry. What? No. We knew what you wanted to say with this. That there is sense. But you know what I want to say?
That the absence of the words can be the words, right? Like that's symbolic efficiency.
Yeah. This is symbolic efficiency. This is symbolic efficiency at its purest. This is not another thing where we have pure symbolic strategy. Do you remember how this joke, which is now very actual, that we all know it, I'm sorry, old Freud's joke, not Freud's, Jewish joke about this lying in the guise of truth. A friend telling his friend, why are you telling me that you go to Lvov and not to Krakow when you are really going to Lvov? But this is what Putin was doing. The irony is today, Lviv is the western capital of Ukraine, is really the target. So Putin had very nice, intelligent, symbolic strategy. He was telling all the time that he plans military intervention into Ukraine.
Right.
But I spoke with politicians here in Germany, I'm in contact, and even 2-3 days before the intervention, that they all repeated to me the same story. Don't be in panic, Putin is not crazy. This is just, he's lying to us.
I know. It's interesting.
But no, he duped us. We were thinking for some strategic discourse. No, he deceived us by telling the truth all the time. And again, this is for Lacan, lying in the guise of truth. It's the ultimate. It's the ultimate symbolic
strategy.
The last one, then I will finish. I take in what I like it that Dwayne Russell's final notion is that, again, this is just paranoid projection. Putin and Biden projecting into another their own fears, blah, blah, blah. No, I think it's what is going on now And what went on already with American weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, it's more an example of what already the early Lacan defines as symbolic communication, where you get from the other your own message in its inverted, that is to say, true form. Didn't this happen to the United States in Iraq?
Yeah.
They went there to save civilization, help women, secularize Iraq. The result is now Iraq is under greater influence of Iran than ever. Fundamentalism is much stronger than under Saddam. Women are much more oppressed and so on. They got their message back. And this is really tragically. Friends who don't want to hate Russians, I have connections in Kiev and elsewhere, are telling me, you know what was Russian justification? That we are really not a different nation, we are part of the same ethnic group, blah, blah, blah. And friends are telling me, in spite of all tensions, it was true till a couple of months ago. Like, it was incredible. A Slovene journalist told me, he was a couple of months ago in Kiev. He went to some cafeterias. People there, it was like two dialects. You spoke with a friend in Ukrainian, then another comes, you shifted to Russian at the everyday level for large majority of people. Now, as the result of the Russian intervention, they really hate Ukrainians.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting.
So like, produce the situation they wanted to avoid.
That's right, that they want to avoid. I mean, it's interesting because Zelensky is a Russian native speaker, right? Like, so yeah, I mean, your point is exactly right. And I wonder what you think about the fact that like, you're right, totally, that all throughout the world, everyone thought Putin was bluffing, except the CIA, right? Like Biden, for weeks before the invasion, was like, they're really going to invade. They're really going to invade. And so
I think here, maybe, I think really Zelensky is not just this demagoguery and so on. Because Zelensky also knew it. But do you remember that days before, he warned Americans, don't talk too much about certainty of invasion because this automatically raises temperature and so on. On the other hand, now the two of you will for sure cut all links with me. I want to say another thing that, oh my God, what will my leftist friends do? You know, some leftists are claiming they're disgusting. I broke with a couple of friendships here. They were not close friendships, but like they claim both sides are guilty, United States and NATO a little bit more, because blah, blah, blah. No. If anything, don't you remember Biden was almost, he talked too much. First, this information that there is, that there will be an invasion, he should precisely not talk about it, but mobilize all the diplomatic channels secret. Another thing, I was here more of a hardliner, but it was a correct position, but you shouldn't tell it publicly. You remember he said a day or two before the war, he said, let's see what kind of invasion will it be. If it will be a smaller invasion, lower sanction, a total occupation, and media went crazy. So I think it was a correct politics to discipline Russia, avoid, but he shouldn't said it publicly.
Yeah,
what this proves is that I think Biden is here in some sense almost a rational guy. He tries to balance helping Ukraine while nonetheless avoiding a new total world war. Or
right. I think that
it's absolutely not true that Biden is pushing for a total conflict and so on. And
right. I think you're right. He's heroically, I think heroically trying to like make this balance between those two horrible. Right. Like, I don't know what he would, but I wonder what you think about this. Like, I was thinking you were going to say that I wondered if you would say this, that his announcing that the invasion was coming was his attempt to make it not happen, right? Like, he was already, that's what, I mean, it didn't work, obviously, but I think that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to say, I'm going to not announce it into being, I'm going to announce it into not being.
Because you know what I almost like about how direct lying of Putin and Russians, even a day or two before, they said, no, this is false war propaganda, we don't want to invade. But then, in a way, they kept their word, because you know what's their solution? We didn't invade Ukraine because Ukraine doesn't exist, really. It does, no? No, so what I'm saying is that what is for certain not true is that United States are here pushing towards a total conflict. No, I think even the best probable, you never know, explanation of what's happening is that Putin read the wrong lesson from Afghanistan fiasco. And he thought, you see, the West is weak, I can do it. But again, a nice example of successful communication, he got the message back now.
Right.
All European countries now want to enter NATO, even countries which always avoided it, like the Great Northern Troika, Finland, Sweden, Norway. You never know what to do. There is one hope. People talk about it last days. You remember Putin said 2-3 days after the war, beginning of invasion, he made an appeal to Ukrainian army. Why don't you depose the leadership and take over? It will be much easier to talk to you. I think we should now tell this to the Russians.
Right.
I always believe in a possible progressive role of an army, of the army.
Right.
It can, because soldiers, secret policemen, they are not all idiots, especially in authoritarian countries. Secret police, if these secret intelligence agencies, yes, they manipulate lie, but at the same time, they know the truth. They know the real situation. This is why it's very interesting. All the big reforms in Soviet Union came, for example, Beria.
I was just thinking of Beria.
And he was secret police, but he knew the truth. And again, it was the same with Gorbachev. Gorbachev was promoted by Andropov, who was secret police, KGB. Before. No? So my solution is, it's a crazy one. If you want peace, support army and secret police. Sorry.
That's good. That's a good.
We are again oppressing you. Say Rosebud at least.
I was actually thinking about, because what I'm starting to see in the US, I'm not sure what it's like in Europe. I'm sure that this is the case, though, where the COVID conspiracies are starting to merge with, Russia-Ukraine conspiracies. And I'm just wondering about, because I've actually, one of the saddest things about to actually happen within the past 2 years is that this sort of contingent of Lacanians who, you mentioned this earlier, Slavoj, in a different context, but this sort of paranoiac direction in which certain amount of Lacanian thought has gone
around COVID.
And on COVID, on COVID in particular, and just what it is. I mean, is it? I'm almost tempted to say it's kind of related to the sort of mystical moments in Lacan, but you wrote a piece about 5 or 6 months ago. I know Alenka has something on conspiracy theories too, but it's so fun.
It's a very good reading of Don't Look Up.
Yeah. But it just strikes me, as a Lacanian, that, and I told you this, and I think that was the name of the piece that you gave it, but like the principle of, le nom du père was entirely, forgotten. And I think that that's, it's related to this, I think in a way, to this, Roussel's claim that you were sort of misreading Rumsfeld and the unknown, known unknowns. But yeah, I guess that's just more of a remark, like what to make of the direction in which certain Lacanians have gone in this sort of paranoiac conspiracy theory, route.
Yeah, but the horrible thing is this one, that they don't. Now I will sound like an old progressive socialist communist. It's this perverted theoretical enjoyment. They just like to prove how everything went wrong. We are in paranoia, and the solution they offer is just utter cynicism. We have to keep the appearances of paranoia even, just don't take them too seriously, But if I may say for conclusion something, one really important point. To me, it means it is the crucial. I don't know how it is in the States, but the right-wingers in Europe, those who for the first week or two of the war were almost pro-Russian. You know what your greatest president, Trump, said. Putin is a genius, intelligent move, blah, blah, all that. Who had a great sympathy for it. Then all of a sudden, like in Europe, Marine Le Pen, Salvini in Italy, and so on, open up to refugees, change their line only to Ukrainian refugees, not to dirty Palestinian or those who they're racist. I mean, the right wing, they don't want them. But the whole, I don't know, that's what I wanted to ask both of you, if it's happening also with you there. Something so utterly depressive and sad. Now that the right wingers became anti-Putin, they have a certain, Alenka also has this line of thought. We will go, well, they have a certain military joy now, which is directly targeting LGBT, sexual oppression, global warming, whatever. Their vision is this one. Now reality is here. Forget about all those bullshitting pseudo problems, global warming, feminism, political correctness, which terms to use. Now we have a conflict. It's the moment of truth.
Right.
And they immediately give to it sexualized meaning in the most traditional sense. They like to emphasize how, in contrast to corrupted Arabs from Syria and so on, that here, those who escape to the West, Poland and so on, are mostly women and children, while men even return to Ukraine to fight. And they say, here you have your answer to transgender and so on. It's pure, good, old-fashioned, normal sexual difference. Women are at that place taking care of children. Men are at their proper place fighting. They really feel it like a liberation. Finally, this war will, and this is, I think, something very tragic. That's why I repeat all the time, no, this war is not the moment of truth. It's the moment of, as Alain Badiou would have put it, the greatest disorientation in this sense. It's very tragic how not only COVID practically disappeared, but I have contacts. Then I conclude. I hope it will amuse you if I add this. I have a contact with some friendly, we still have contacts, conspiracy theorists, and now they have a whole theory. They claim it began with global warming. This is for them conspiracy theory, Then we have COVID. Now that COVID diluted and people were tired of global warming, they, and some of them go even so far as to say this is not a serious war. It's all arranged between Putin and big corporate capital. Now there is war. And then I like this. They claim there already is a next step. Guess which one? Aliens. They claim, no,
of course.
In newspapers, there was a notice that we are getting regularly every 18 minutes some signal from the space. The idea is that they are already preparing the terrain to keep us in shock and subordinate position, that they will evoke even aliens. No?
Yeah.
So that's what makes me so sad here.
Well, and really quickly. Yeah. Well, Slavoj, quickly to one of your points. I don't know, Todd. I'm interested what Todd has experienced by this, but I do know to your question about how Ukrainian refugees are viewed here. I mean, it's a complete, and this is pretty obvious, but it's a complete 180 from Middle Eastern refugees, right? I mean, there's compilations now where you can find of actual anchors from CBS News, CNN, just saying on air, accompanying the video of, the Ukrainians, these are middle-class people. This is as there weren't any, middle-class doctors or anything in Iraq when we decided to go into Iraq. So the sympathy level is entirely different.
What one of them said, but these are civilized people. One of them said, these are blonde people with blue eyes.
With blue eyes, yeah.
I think, my God, my answer is sorry, but didn't blonde people with blue eyes do something not very civilized in Germany in the 30s and 40s? No, it's absolute. But I told you already this at the beginning, I think, or before we went on, that almost the lowest degree was here the one of Slovene government, where we Slovenes accepted only 5 refugees from Afghanistan, claiming this is a different culture, blah, blah. And even our prime minister wrote a tweet where he said, these are men with whom we collaborated there. Why don't they remain there and fight the Taliban and so on? But Slovenia, shitty country, 2 million people, when the Ukrainian problem exploded, they said, we can accept up to 200,000.
Wow.
So you know what this means? Like one Ukrainian is worth 40,000. I mean, it's such an open racism that it's incredible.
Right,
They really, and my argument against them, in my last text, I quote a lot that nightmarish guy, Putin's philosopher, Alexander Dugin, who said there is a Russian truth, there is European truth. But if we talk like this, yes, to Ukrainian refugees because they are our European culture, we are talking like Dugin.
Right.
We are interpreting this war as a clash of cultures. If nothing else, what about thousands of people who protest, as you already said, in Russia? You know who is one among them? I was in contact with her. Did you meet her on some of these things? That a Russian lady from, I say Leningrad, I don't acknowledge Petersburg, Oksana Timofeyeva.
Oh, yeah, I know her. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. You know what happened to her a week ago? She's risking her life. Now she escaped to Germany. Some imagine she was arrested, beaten, protesting in Petersburg, and so on. But then she got already half a year ago, I don't know, some invitation to a symposium, all scholarship, short, everything paid. And now it was cancelled because she is Russian.
Oh my God.
She who is a hero there. Are we crazy? I mean, are we crazy?
But that's a racist response, right? I mean, that's the
yeah. And that's the problem. That's the problem, that this war will give such a boost to European racism. And it's crucial to prevent this. Because if we do this, even if in the short term we stop Putin, Putin will win. You know who is now my favorite Putin character? Did you read what that metropolitan, how they call it? Okay, the boss of the Russian Orthodox Church, Kirill.
Yeah.
You know what he said? He not only praised Putin as the greatest Russian patriot, but I love this in a horrified way. He said that Russian military intervention into Ukraine is the highest act of loving your neighbor.
I know. I saw that.
You know, you can always rely on priests to say this.
I know. And you know that Francis will not name Putin. He will not name Putin because he's afraid of precisely that guy. He doesn't want to offend him because he's trying to heal this split between orthodoxy and Catholicism.
Yeah.
So he's acting just like Pius, right? Like it's just like Pius who wouldn't say Hitler's name.
Yeah. But you know what also happened? It horrified me of how this was also racism. You know, suddenly they discovered when he bombed, I don't know, it was already Kharkov or now that Mariupol or what, that Putin is a war criminal. Sorry. But when Russians, to save Assad regime, bombed Aleppo, the largest city, bigger than Damascus in Syria, the bombing was absolutely more brutal. Right. It was a real total bombing. We just mildly protested there. You know, like we in Europe, in the Western civilization, we will have to confront this problem. Otherwise, we will be losing the battle in, I don't like the name, the third world. You know, Russia is not losing there. Even if the government, like Indonesia, the government is a little bit more pro-Ukraine, but ordinary people are for Russia. In some Arab countries in the Middle East, it's the same. Israel, incidentally, is playing the same game, ambiguous. And you know what's the irony that gives you hope? The one who is the arch counter-revolutionary conservative European, Viktor Orban of Hungary, he doesn't want to break with Putin. His position is NATO is more guilty, Hungary should stay out. Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. Yeah. I mean, you have this split.
Yeah.
Listen,
okay,
sorry,
let's stop, Slavoj.
Let's collapsing, but it was so nice, you know. It's now I'm returning to this shit called ordinary reality here.